Good morning. Happy Wednesday. Um, I hear a lot of talk that Donald Trump and his supporters are seeking some kind of Christian nationalism, or that there is a group of people who are Christian nationalists in the United States. I don't really see any veracity to that. I mean, there might be a small number of people who feel that way. I'm sure you can find some wackos out there, but you know, there's actually been open demonstrations where you have sort of an Islamist communist alliance, Islamic communism. You go to some of these uh, universities where they're having these protests, they're actually calling for genocide. They're calling for eradication of Israel when they say from the river to the sea. But everybody knows, everybody's got an opinion about that. But I noticed there's this really bizarre alliance forming between radical Islamists, some of whom live here, some of whom we've imported from somewhere else, and violent neo-Marxist far left, Antifa, BLM, and that type of people, carrying the hammers and sickles and the red flags, dressed in black. You have those people, and you have the militant, I guess you call them the trans activists, the people who say that a man can be a woman if he says he is. I don't know. You see these banners of like queers for Palestine, feminists for Gaza, but they're all marching together. And these are three different groups who normally wouldn't like each other. Um, Most Islamic countries are not really communist. They don't care much for the commies. Um, Not to mention that Marx and Engels were Jewish, but you have this weird thing where these radical Islamists are marching side by side with the far left neo-Marxists and the trans activists. They don't really like each other. If you went over with your pride flag to Gaza or Riyadh or Mecca or anywhere like that, you'd be thrown off of a building. If a bunch of feminists went to Gaza and said, hey, you know, we're going to teach you about, ending the patriarchy. What would happen to those women? They would be, I don't know, they'd be unalived fairly quickly. So it just comes down to when I hear these people say, well, Donald Trump is a Christian nationalist. Well, Donald Trump is not really much of a Christian. I know the evangelicals support him, and I did find that weird. He made his money with casinos and selling alcohol, even though he doesn't drink. Um, that was his business. The owners, I believe the owners of the Marriott Hotel are Mormons, and they don't drink, but they sure as heck like to sell alcohol. But anyway, it was just kind of a weird. I saw these people marching together, and I'm like, they don't even like each other. But I think what it is they might not like each other. They might even hate each other, but they're united in their firm hatred of the United States, our Constitution, our freedom, our liberty. Um, they don't like it that you could have a Muslim and a Jew and a Christian all going to college together and getting along peacefully. They don't like that. Um, they they don't even like Western civilization as a whole. And unfortunately, given the events that we've had recently, where the two Israelis were shot in Washington D.C. Then you had the firebombing attack um, in Colorado, the guy with the Molotov cocktails setting elderly Jewish women on fire. I believe there were men involved too, but I think that it was mostly women, elderly people who were not doing anything. They were just basically holding a vigil. It wasn't even really much of a demonstration. But there are people around the world who don't like our freedom and our liberty, and they don't like the idea that people acknowledge each other's right to exist. And in the United States, basically, are there people I don't like? Yeah, can't stand them. But you know what? If they leave me alone, I leave them alone. Um, your freedom to be you does not outweigh my freedom to be free from you, and vice versa. In a free society, people are going to do things you don't like, but they also need to understand that you might do things they don't like either. That's one of the First Amendment is one of the bedrocks of our society. But the First Amendment is peaceable assembly, not blocking traffic, not throwing bricks through windows or anything like that. But when you see these young people, a lot of college age people will get caught up in this stuff where, down with the patriarchy and capitalism and this and that. And it's like they don't understand capitalism is the best way to lift the most people out of poverty. Imagine you take a place like Gaza, which is like a third world hellhole right now. But if you that's some of the most valuable real estate, or should be some of the most valuable real estate in the entire world. If you took that, I believe it's like 25 miles long or something, right along the Mediterranean, right there at above the Sinai, going up along the west coast of where Israel is now. If you had people who knew what they were doing and they went in there, they could build hotels, they could build casinos, they could build resorts. The Gazans who have been kept in poverty by their own leaders, instead of embracing terrorism and genocide, imagine if they had good jobs. They had people coming there willing to spend money. And I know that Islam is not big on alcohol, but you look at countries, you look at Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and a couple other places that they're Islamic countries, but they've embraced capitalism. And everything I've heard that Dubai, like the airport, everything's made of marble and gold, and they have actually have an indoor ski slope in the middle of the desert. That's how much money they have because they've embraced capitalism. They can still have their Muslim faith and everything, but there's nothing wrong. Capitalism can be good for Jews, Christians, Muslims, atheists, Buddhists, whatever you are. But just think if that place, that Gaza Strip, was under proper management and the people embraced communism, embraced capitalism, rejected communism and collectivism, and they made their area welcome to capital investment. I mean, that'd be like the French Riviera. There'd be so many people flocking to go there if they were assured that it would be safe. You would have people coming from all over the world to enjoy vacation there. Um, but it just seems like this focus on the hatred of Israel, and a lot of Americans are not really fans of Israel. A lot of Americans, the anti-Semitism is pretty strong among many people in the United States. But the thing is, what they don't realize is that, yeah, down with Israel and all that stuff, but if they view the radical Islamists and the others uh, allied with them, they hate Israel, but they also hate the United States. With very few exceptions, I've found that most people who hate Israel hate the United States, and most people who hate the United States also hate Israel. It's very rare that you're going to find somebody who loves one and not the other. At least that's been my observation in my life. Um, I've been around on this planet 60 years, and I found that people oftentimes in that part of the world, in the Middle East, they will call Israel the little Satan and the United States the great Satan. Um, Iran right now is very close to obtaining nuclear weapons. Their delivery system is probably not that good, but eventually they're going to figure it out. And if anybody thinks that they're just going to attack Israel and not try and find a way to attack the United States, well, I got a bridge for sale in Brooklyn for you. Um, the problem is not the Iranian people. Many Iranian people love Americans. There are Iranians, or they call themselves Persians, living in the United States who are very patriotic, great people, smart, industrious, hardworking. It's their regime, their government that screwed up. Um, but they have said if we get a nuclear weapon, we are going to use it against Israel. They've all but said it. Um, so Israel's in a tight situation. They don't. Um, if they don't act mean enough, they're going to look weak. If they retaliate in kind, then they're going to look like a bully. But the whole thing is a mess over there. If Hamas said, okay, we give up. We're not going to be terrorists anymore. We want to live peacefully. And they put down their weapons, the conflict would be over. There'd be no more conflict tomorrow. If the Israelis said, okay, we're going to put down all our weapons, well, there'd be no more Israel tomorrow. They'd be eradicated. And I find it funny that you have people saying, hey, ho, ho, genocide has got to go, while they support Hamas, which has genocide as part of their charter. It's kind of a weird world we live in. You know, words don't mean what people think they mean. Um, but yeah, I just noticed that I hear them saying, oh, you know, we have Christian nationalists in the United States. It's like, well, what exactly is a nationalist? How do you actually define that? Is it somebody who's a patriot? I mean, I'm a veteran. I'm a patriot. I fly an American flag outside my house. Does that make me a nationalist? You know, I'm a patriot. I think there's a thin line there, and that word nationalist is going to take on bad connotations. Like somebody might say, well, you're a nationalist. You love your country. You must hate everybody else. I don't believe that. I love the United States. I've been in 35 different countries on 3 continents. Every one of them had their good and bad points. But this is my home. This is where my loyalty is. Now, being a patriot means you love your country, but you can still distrust your government and you can criticize your government when they do something wrong. And Lord knows our government does a lot of things wrong. But, you know, if I was in the United States Army and I have an American flag on my uniform or the American flag, does that make me a nationalist? You know, if the president wears an American flag on, you know, his lapel, does that make him a nationalist? Loving America, loving the United States doesn't mean you just hate everybody else. It means you love the people inside your country. It doesn't mean you have to hate everybody outside. But on a related note, you have to have your country strong first before you can go helping everybody else. You have to fix your own messes first. Um, it's like if your house is on fire, you're not going to go help your neighbor paint his kitchen. Okay. If your house is on fire, you're not going to go help your neighbor pull weeds in his yard. You have to have your priorities straight. If you're flying in an airplane and the cabin loses pressure, the oxygen masks come down. What do? You put your oxygen mask on first, and then you go help the person next to you. Otherwise, you're both useless. So people have to do things not only in the proper manner, but also in the proper order. I'm getting carried away, but I just find it funny that people have a fear of Christian nationalism, but they don't have a fear of Islamic communism. And I know those two words, you don't think they would go together, but you know, the United States is not a Christian nation. We are a secular republic founded on Judeo-Christian values. But Article 6 of the Constitution says that there shall be no religious test for public office. And of course, we have our First Amendment, which is not really a separation of church and state, as many people say. It just means that the government doesn't mess with religion, and thus we don't really want religion messing with government either. That doesn't say people of faith can't be in government. They have a right to, but you can be a Muslim, a Christian, a Jew, an atheist, a Buddhist, a Hindu, or whatever, and run for public office in the United States and be elected by your fellow citizens. That differentiates us from many other parts in the world. Um, you probably wouldn't be elected to do much of anything in Gaza unless you were a practicing Muslim, and you would almost have to be a certain type of Muslim. There's different variations between Shia and Sunni, Wahhabi, and others. Um, I learned from living in Germany, where they have a lot of Muslims. There's Muslims from Turkey are different than Muslims from Northern Africa or Muslims from uh, Saudi Arabia or Syria or someplace like that. And then there's also Muslims from Pakistan and Muslims from Indonesia and Malaysia. They're they're all different, and there are more Muslims who are not Arabs than there are Muslims who are Arabs. The largest population of a Muslim nation, if I recall correctly, is actually Indonesia. But now most Arabs are Muslims, but most Muslims are not Arabs. Iran, they're Muslims. They're not Arabs at all. They're Persians. They're actually the original Caucasians, I suppose, because they're near the Caucasus Mountains. But it's a weird thing. Religious wars never end up going very well. It doesn't end up well. But when you combine uh, a militant group of people of any religion and you combine them with communists or neo-Marxists or other type of totalitarianism, it can be really, really bad. Um, you think of Armenians in Turkey, okay? Didn't turn out very well for them. So they're, you think of the Holocaust with Nazi Germany and the Jewish people, but there's been other similar situations around the world, even if it's to a smaller scale. And Stalin actually, communism killed many more people than the Nazis did. Of course, it still does today because the Nazis fortunately were defeated, but there's still communism in various iterations all around the world. But when you get these weird amalgamations of groups together who normally wouldn't like each other, they're capable of doing a heck of a lot of damage. But that's just something to think about. You want to be free. Um, the price of freedom is always eternal vigilance, and we have to really be careful. We're basically importing terrorists and savages into our country, and then we're surprised when we get terrorism and savagery within our own borders. Um, there's only a few countries in the world I know that do their best to prevent that from happening. Poland, Hungary, and maybe Romania are saying, wait a minute, no, we don't want that stuff coming here. Now, we in the United States, we try to be inclusive and accepting, but we also have to be vigilant. So just, always be careful of the totalitarian agenda because it'll rear its head in the weirdest places. And they say politics makes for strange bedfellows. Well, they ain't kidding in that one. When you see people with, queers for Gaza or feminists for Palestine or feminists for Islam or whatever, you got to say, what? But, that's the world we live in today. So that's just my rant for Wednesday morning. Um, I just, I don't know. It's just a weird world we live in. I think of my grandson and what it's going to be like by the time he's a young adult. We're definitely in some interesting times. Well, be peaceful, everybody. And always remember if you want to live a better life, don't hurt people. I should say, don't initiate force against people and don't steal their stuff. Life will be better that way for all of us.